But 3 of them stay back, and one particular bull goes after Tao's son Keta. After savagely hitting him with its horns, it drags him to the edge of the cliff, where Keta falls to the abyss after Tao hits the beast with his spear. This all begins 1 week earlier, when the teenagers of the tribe are tested on their spear-making skills. The only ones to pass are Keta and his friend Kappa, so they will be brought to the last hunting expedition before winter comes. As part of the ritual that marks them as adults now, they also get beat up by the other men to learn that pain will journey with them, and they are blessed by the local shaman by the campfire. Later, while pretending to be asleep, Keta overhears Tao and his mother Ro talking. Ro does not think he is ready to hunt because he leads with his heart, not his spear, but Tao believes Keta must do his part and prove himself to the tribe. The next morning, the hunting party leaves after saying goodbye to their loved ones and getting the shaman's blessing. Ro even gives Keta an extra piece of fur as a safety token. The party begins traveling across the land by following the sacred path left by their ancestors, who have made a series of rock sculptures that leave a trail for them to follow. The hand paintings on them point at the direction they must take to the hunting ground. During the trip, they come across another hunting party led by Zai, an old friend of Tao's who has recently lost his son. Both parties begin traveling together then. Whenever he has the chance, Keta tries to prove himself to his father, but he is not able to start a fire and cannot bring himself to kill the boar the other men capture, so he feels like a failure. One night, while they are eating by the fire, they hear a noise behind them, so they swiftly jump onto a defensive position. When nothing comes, they quickly relax, which proves to be a mistake. A cave lion suddenly jumps out and snatches Kappa, who it takes away to feed on. The next morning, the men build a cairn to give Kappa a memorial service that symbolizes the passing of one's spirit to the afterlife. The trip continues with only stops to hunt and rest. One evening, when they find a large and safe cave to sleep in, Tao takes the chance to make Keta get a tattoo of the constellations just like him. That way he will always find a way home. It takes a good amount of days, but eventually, they find a trail of dump that takes them to a herd of steppe bison, which brings the story back to the beginning. As he falls, Keta tries to hold onto a rough cliff edge, but he slips and lands on a further ledge, where he breaks a leg and falls unconscious. Desperate to save his son, Tao tries to climb down, but his fellow hunters stop him, pointing out it is too late. While the men bring the sleds to carry the bison on, Tao stays by the edge of the cliff, crying in denial. Now that their hunt has been divided equally, Shi's party leaves on their own to return to their home, so Tao's group has one last night of camping before convincing their leader it's time to move on. The following morning, Tao builds another cairn while tears of grief continue to fall. Many hours after the party is gone, a vulture lands on Keta and tries to feed on him. This makes him wake up, and after pushing the bird off him by wringing its neck, he realizes the situation he is in. Dragging his broken leg behind him, Keta tries to climb down, but there are not enough rough edges for him to hold on, and ends up hanging in there for a long excruciating moment. Soon after, a storm arrives and begins flooding the ground below him, so Keta comes to terms with what he has to do and lets go of his grip, landing in the water and falling unconscious again. When he wakes up the next morning, it has stopped raining and the flooding is gone. After drinking water from a poodle and splinting his injured foot, Keta slowly makes his way back to the top of the cliff, where he finds the memorial his father left for him. But Keta kicks it out in frustration when he realizes he has been left behind and must find his way home on his own. Keta begins traveling alone. He feeds himself bugs, fills his canteen in any poodle he can find, and climbs trees to sleep safely at night away from predators. When a pack of wolves finds him in the middle of the day, Keta runs to a tree again, stabbing one of the wolves when it grabs his leg before he finally climbs to safety. He stays on top of the tree until the wolves get tired of waiting and they all leave except for the one Keta injured. He prepares a spear to finish it off, but he cannot bring himself to do it, so he decides to ignore it instead. Except Keta cannot do that either. The wolf's painful whining is too much to hear. Keta decides to help and, after tying up its snout not to get bitten, he picks up the wolf and carries it to the lake in order to clean its wound. Sadly, they cannot rest there for long because there are hyenas nearby, so Keta carries the wolf again until they find shelter in a cave where they can sleep safely. The next morning, Keta finds a mortar near a bunch of bones and uses it to create a plant salve that he applies on his foot while the wolf manages to free his snout. Seeing as the animal is behaving, Keta decides to share his water with it, which the wolf finally accepts after lots of growling. Keta goes as far as cleaning the wound with the fur his mother gave him and sharing the worms he finds with the wolf as well. But worms are not enough to keep themselves fed, so Keta finally gets brave enough to make his first hunt. He kills a rabbit with a rock and even manages to start a fire at last to cook it. The wolf tries to take the rabbit from him, but Keta quickly pushes him away, remembering the lessons about leadership his father has taught him. He establishes dominance by always eating first and feeding the wolf after he is done. No matter how much he shares with it though, the wolf still will not allow him to touch it. Winter is quickly approaching and Keta must find a way home before snow begins to fall. He does not think he can make it without his father, but he has to try. After putting together enough supplies and struggling with the wolf to get his fur back, Keta leaves the cave and begins walking his way back, feeling frustrated because the wolf will not stop following him no matter how many times he tells it to go away. Eventually, Keta gives up and accepts the wolf as his new travel companion, even training it to come over when he whistles. Their first attempts at hunting together are a complete bust, but after a few tries, they manage to find a way to sync their attacks and get their prey without too much effort. At night, Keta double-checks they are going in the right direction by using the constellation tattoo on his hand, and the wolf begins sleeping next to him, even allowing him to touch it now that he has gained his trust. After an afternoon spent in the lake bathing and fishing, Keta decides to name the wolf Alpha. Their trip is taking so long that winter finally catches up with them and snow starts to fall. One evening while they are eating by the bonfire, they are approached by a pack of wolves that turns out to be Alpha's family. Knowing what it's like to miss your loved ones, Keta tells Alpha to go with them, so now he is left to continue traveling alone. As time passes, snowstorms become more common, so Keta is having difficulty making much progress each day, especially when he has a devastating dream of Tao arriving home and giving Ro the bad news. After a few days of walking through yet another storm, he comes across Alpha and its pack, but when he runs towards them, the ice breaks under his feet and he falls into the freezing water. As his mother's fur and most of his equipment float away, Keta hits the ice with his knife and manages to break enough to let Alpha drag him out. The two of them begin traveling together again, and later that night, Keta sleeps hugging Alpha to regain some warmth in his freezing body. After advancing a few more miles, they find a trail of tracks that they follow to a hut, but sadly, the owner has frozen to death. There is no food to be found, but Keta does grab a bow and arrow to hunt, ignoring Alpha's worry when he suddenly begins to cough up blood. Sometime later, the duo finds itself between a rock and a hard place. There are hyenas following them but also a very dangerous storm ahead of them, so they run until they find a cave to hide in. Unfortunately, the place is not empty. There is a cave lion that does not hesitate to attack them. Alpha fights it fiercely while Keta puts the arrow on his bow, concentrating to hit the right target. He manages to kill the lion and save Alpha, who still comes out heavily wounded from the fight. When they go back to very slowly traveling in the middle of the snowstorm, they find the sculpture that marks the sacred path, so Keta knows they must be close. His hope gets stronger when the northern lights appear above them one night, a sign that his ancestors must be guiding them. However, Alpha is too weak to keep going, and one day he finally collapses. Not wanting to leave his friend behind, Keta begins to carry the wolf in his arms, ignoring the fact he is also weak and continues to cough up blood. The conditions are so harsh that Keta eventually collapses as well. But then, he finds encouragement in a memory that comes to him in a dream. It is the conversation he overheard his parents having the night before they left. To help Ro not to worry, Tao had told her Keta is stronger than even himself knows. With newly acquired strength gained from his father's belief in him, Keta wakes up and picks up Alpha again, carrying it through the storm until they finally make it back to his tribe. Nobody can believe what they are seeing, and Tao cries as he tells his son how proud he is before taking him and the wolf into a tent to be taken care of. After Keta is patched up and fed, the shaman examines Alpha, quickly realizing what its problem is. Alpha is actually female, and she is giving birth. All the puppies are born safely and healthy, and the tribe welcomes them as part of the family. Years later, once the puppies have become proper adult wolves, they are assigned to hunt. In Tokyo, the dysfunctional Suzuki family lives in a suburban apartment complex. The wife Mitsu is talking to her father Sasaki, who has sent the family a box of fresh vegetables and fish. He wishes they would visit him more often. When Mitsu tries to make her daughter Yui talk to her grandfather, she refuses to do so and complains about the fish smell. After the call, Mitsu tries to prepare the fish but she finds it too disgusting. Her husband Yoshiyuki doesn't want to touch it either, so the fish ends up in the freezer. When they see a bug on the vegetables, they freak out so much that they don't even notice that it's actually Yui's fake eyelashes. Yoshiyuki ignores everything and keeps asking for food while Yui only has eyes for her phone, so it's up to Mitsu to throw the bug away. Eventually the son Kenji arrives but doesn't greet anyone. He never takes off his headphones, and when Mitsu asks him if he wants dinner, he just shows her the fast food he bought and goes to his room without saying a single word. In their rooms, the siblings only spend time on their screens. Mitsu is worried about the smartphone bills and asks Yoshiyuki to talk to his kids about it, but he only pays attention to the TV. The next morning, Yoshiyuki oversleeps because his alarm clock hasn't rung. He checks it to discover that the hands are stuck at 3. Mitsu informs him there's a blackout while throwing away the fish. Soon Yui wakes up too and freaks out because her phone is out of battery. Mitsu wants to make breakfast but can't because the rice cooker and the electromagnetic stove aren't working. She manages to turn on a gas burner, however the family refuses to wait and leaves without eating. Unfortunately the elevator isn't working either, so all the residents have to go down several flights of stairs. At the station, the trains aren't working either and nobody knows when they'll resume, so Yoshiyuki has to walk to the office. Meanwhile Kenji is going to class on his bicycle and notices that his phone has quickly run out of battery. In fact, The only thing moving on the streets is bicycles because cars have stopped working as well. A taxi driver tries to restart his engine with some water to no avail. Outside her building, Mitsu talks to the neighbors and they confirm nobody has power. The ladies decide to go shopping for candles and Mitsu wants to come along, only to realize she left her wallet in the apartment. When Yoshiyuki arrives at his company, everyone is outside because the doors have electric locks that won't open. Two men decide to break the glass so everyone can come in. Employees have to take the stairs to their offices, but they realize they can't work because there are no lights and no computers. At school, Yui discovers all her classmates are arriving late and nobody has a working phone. Some teachers can't even come to work, so many classes are sent to the study hall. At college, Kenji is going through the same situation. At the grocery store, Mitsu discovers that the pre-made food shelves are already empty. People are buying things like candles and water in great quantities, so she does the same. The store employees announce that they can't take credit cards because of the blackout, so clients can only pay in cash. Everyone rushes to the nearest ATM, however these aren't working either. After a few hours of waiting and doing nothing, Yoshiyuki's boss sends everyone home early. Refusing to walk again, Yoshiyuki decides to buy a bicycle. Unfortunately, prices have gone up to the extreme because everyone is desperate for one, so Yoshiyuki has no choice but to pay extra. When he arrives at his building, he finds an old lady resting on the stairs because climbing so many steps is too much for her. Later, while the family has dinner by candlelight, Yoshiyuki insists on working with pen and paper. Anytime they use the toilet, they have to flush it by throwing water from the bathtub. There's no water in the kitchen sink, so Mitsu can't do the dishes. Meanwhile, Yui tries to read a magazine by candlelight and comes so close to the flame that she burns her hair. Tired of doing nothing in their rooms, the siblings come out and Mitsu invites the whole family to the balcony. Since there isn't a single city light, there's a wonderful view of the stars. 2 days later, power still hasn't come back. Mitsu is washing clothes by hand using water from the tub. At school, Yui only finds a handful of students, so she decides to leave. At the office, the boss announces that the company will be closed until power is restored. Then Yoshiyuki watches his boss leave with his family for the mountains, hoping to find water and food there. When he turns around, he discovers a guy trying to steal his bicycle and quickly scares him away. In the meantime, Kenji rides his bicycle to the next town, only to discover that power is down here too. He's looking for the girl he likes, but when he sees her come out, he panics and hides. His bicycle falls and hurts his foot while he watches the girl leave town with her family. At the water treatment plant, Mitsu and other neighbors wait for hours to fill their bottles. However, the employees inform them that they've shut down the building because the pumps aren't working. There's water underground, but since it's not treated it can be dangerous to drink it, so they refuse to gather it by hand. The crowd protests at the lack of help. At the bank, Yoshiyuki hears bankers explain that ATMs and debit cards aren't working, so the only way to get cash is by presenting an ID and the bank passbook. Each person is only allowed to withdraw the equivalent of $600. People freak out and start pushing each other as they try to get in first. They cause Yoshiyuki to drop all his paperwork, and when he tries to pick it up, they end up hurting him. He has to escape to take care of his bleeding nose. On the 7th day of the blackout, grocery stores are empty and schools are closed. Some people have traveled to neighboring towns in search of food and water only to find the same situation. More and more citizens are leaving Tokyo by the hour, hoping to find a solution in the countryside. After a pointless meeting with their neighbors, Yoshiyuki and Mitsu check on an old lady in their building whom they haven't seen in a while. It turns out she's died and her family has come to retrieve the body. After this shock, the couple decides it's time to leave the city too, so they inform the kids that they'll travel to stay with their grandfather. When Yui protests because she finds little villages boring, Mitsu points out that she used to like playing on the village's beach when she was a child, but Yui doesn't remember this. Afterward, the family starts packing and a frustrated Kenji throws away the picture of the girl he likes. Everyone puts any cash they can find on the table and Mitsu reveals she's got a decent amount of money she's been saving for emergencies. On their way out, the family hears the barking of an abandoned dog, but they ignore it. The siblings have bicycles, but Mitsu has to share with Yoshiyuki. They start making their way to the airport and notice lots of residents leaving on foot. There are also many people selling food and water, but Yoshiyuki refuses to pay for their crazy prices. Unfortunately, the further they go, the higher the prices are. Eventually they stop at a store and Mitsu manages to negotiate with the clerk to get a good price for a big order. This is a good moment for them to rest and eat something. The siblings watch a man getting an impressive number of fish from the river, yet they find it disgusting. When they try to go to the public bathroom, the smell is unbearable because the toilets haven't been flushed for days. They have no choice but to do it behind the bushes. When the family finally makes it to the airport, there's a desperate crowd gathering outside. The planes aren't working either, and the cops try to put up a barrier to keep people away. Half of the crowd gets angry and attacks the officers while the other half walks away. In the evening, the family decides to stay at the closest motel and has to pay too much for the room. Yoshiyuki announces they'll travel to the village by bicycle and Yui spends several minutes complaining about it. The next morning the siblings break into a library to get a map, but all of them are gone except for one for kids. Kenji does some calculations and concludes it'll take them a month to reach the village by bicycle. Meanwhile, Yoshiyuki and Mitsu are looking for a bicycle for her and find one outside a rice store. The clerk isn't taking cash or expensive objects, she only exchanges rice for water or other food. The couple convinces her to give them the bicycle and a bag of rice in exchange for some bottles of alcohol. When the family finally leaves, they keep encountering closed roads, and Yoshiyuki concludes that the kitty map is useless. Then they decide to take the expressway, since nobody is asking for money at the booths. On the highway, they discover hundreds of people leaving the city. Sometime later they stop to rest at a mall, but the doors are locked so they have to camp outside. When a desperate couple asks them if they have water to share, Mitsu hides their bottles and Yoshiyuki tells them they don't have any left. That night, the family has trouble sleeping because it's very cold. Kenji discovers a guy stealing their water and immediately runs after him, following him into a tunnel. When he's about to attack, he notices that the robber has a baby, so he lets him have the water. The next day the family gets ready to cross that tunnel and finds a group of blind ladies at the entrance. They offer to guide people if they're paid properly. Since the tunnel is a simple straight road, the family ignores them and moves ahead. However, the darkness soon gets them in trouble. They keep bumping into abandoned cars and stepping on nasty stuff like a dead raccoon. They end up going back and paying a blind lady, who easily guides them through the tunnel until they reach the exit. On the 16th day of the blackout, the family rests near the river and takes the chance to wash some clothes. They're almost out of matches and there's no water left. Yoshiyuki decides to drink from the river, ignoring his family's warnings. In the afternoon, a heavy rainstorm hits the area, so the family is forced to take shelter under a bridge. While they watch their bicycles and things being blown by the wind, Yoshiyuki suddenly runs to the middle of the field. It turns out he has diarrhea because of the river water he drank. When the storm is finally over, the family starts picking up their things, which have spread all over the place. Mitsu's glasses are cracked, the rice is dirty on the ground, and a bicycle tire has been destroyed. Yoshiyuki is still feeling sick, so the family rushes to the nearest town. While the parents rest, the siblings break into a supermarket. Unfortunately, there's no food, matches, or tires left. The only things they grab are a flare, cat food, and battery liquid, which is purified water and therefore edible. When they return to camp, Yui tries the cat food and spits it because it's disgusting. Kenji has no choice but to use his silicone phone case to fix his bicycle tire. As days continue to pass, the family gets used to dealing with the rain and eating cat food. The next time they stop to rest they meet the Saito family, who seem to be doing just fine. They often went riding through the mountains and camped out a lot, so they know many survival techniques. There's water seeping through rocks with moss, and air drying food to make it last longer. They also point out which weeds are edible and even recommend eating cicadas. One of the boys has an old mechanical camera that still works, so he takes a picture of them. Yui gives him an address so he can send a copy later. Afterward the families decide to continue their journey together. Mitsu and the kids get along with the Saitos and are very grateful for their advice, but Yoshiyuki is green with envy and rides very fast as if trying to show off. When they stop at a bridge to rest, they see a group of soldiers walking by. A man explains that they come from a nuclear power plant, which wasn't working either. Now they're going to the next prefecture to check on a different plant. Then the families decide to part ways because the Suzukis are going to Osaka to check if the rumors of power working there are true. On day 43, the family discovers that Osaka doesn't have power either. Yui freaks out since they don't have food or water, and an argument ensues. It ends with the family agreeing that Yoshiyuki isn't a responsible caretaker. While looking around the city, they're shocked to find lots of people eating fish outside an aquarium. The employees are handing out all the aquarium animals to be used as food, so the family rushes to get in line. Sadly, by the time they make it to the front, there's no food left. On day 67, the group is exhausted and they collapse in the middle of the countryside. A desperate Yoshiyuki grabs a bug, but before he can eat it, he sees a pig nearby. The family works together to surround it, and after lots of struggle, Yoshiyuki manages to kill the pig as they roll down the hill. Neither he nor Mitsu wants to cut it open though, so Kenji is in charge of the knife. Before he can move, he's stopped by Farmer Tanaka, who slashes the pig's neck without hesitation. Afterward the family drags the dead pig to Tanaka's house, where they can drink water from a well. Tanaka explains that his electric fences stopped working, so all his pigs ran away. If the family helps him catch them all again, he'll share his food. The group agrees and Tanaka gives them a very nice breakfast that includes smoked pork. It's so delicious that it makes Yui cry. After a neighbor comes by to drop some vegetables, Tanaka forces the family to help him butcher the pig. They're pretty disgusted but push through it for the sake of survival. This usually takes Tanaka a lot of time, but now the process is going faster thanks to all this help. The meat is cut into pieces and salted for conservation. When it's time for a bath, they have to fill the tub with buckets from the well and start a fire with wood to heat the water. That night, Tanaka lends them pajamas that he bought for when his son's family visits. Those relatives are living in the USA now and he doesn't have a way to contact them. Yoshiyuki and Mitsu realize how lucky they are to still have their kids with them and fall asleep holding hands. For the next few days, the family spends all their time with chores and learns a lot about farm life. They chase after all the pigs and actually have lots of fun bringing them back to the farm. Yui learns how to sew from Mitsu, who is in charge of washing clothes. Yoshiyuki chops wood and Kenji has better tools to fix his bicycle. Tanaka asks the family to live with him, since they're very helpful and he hates being alone. However, the Suzukis would rather be with their grandfather. As thanks, Tanaka gives them enough smoked pork for the rest of their trip. A few days later, the family makes it to the river and is devastated to discover that there's no bridge. Yoshiyuki finds an oar, some rope, and wood by the shore, so they work together to build a raft. First the guys take the women and their things to the other side, then they go back to get their bicycles. Suddenly it starts raining, so they need to hurry. Yoshiyuki and Kenji move as fast as possible, but unfortunately the raft breaks under the weight of the bicycles. Kenji gives up and quickly swims to reunite with the others, but the stubborn Yoshiyuki keeps clinging to the wood and eventually the bicycles push him underwater. His family screams in despair as they see the current drag him away. After the rain stops, Kenji goes looking for his father but only finds his toupee. Everyone immediately breaks down in grief. On day 94, the group is following the train tracks. Mitsu is too depressed to keep walking, so Kenji has to pull her to make her move. When they grab some pork from their bags to eat, a dog approaches them and whines to beg for food. Yui wants to feed the poor thing, but Kenji scolds her. The dog steals the pork from Yui's hand anyway and runs away. Soon more dogs show up and a Doberman jumps to grab Mitsu's bag with its mouth. She tries to take it back, but the struggle causes her to fall and roll down the hill. The kids immediately rush to help her and discover she's broken her ankle. They help her walk after seeing the dogs eat everything in her bag. When they try to leave, they walk very slowly because of Mitsu's condition. The dogs quickly come back for more, so the family holds each other and waits for the worst. At that moment a steam train appears on the tracks, so the dogs run away. The train stops right in front of the family, who immediately come aboard for the rest of their journey. There are plenty of water bottles to share and lots of people from Tokyo who are also moving to the countryside. A doctor bandages Mitsu's ankle and asks about their father, causing the kids to cry. Meanwhile on the river shore, Yoshiyuki wakes up and starts walking. However, he's too weak to go far and ends up collapsing against a tractor. Suddenly he sees the train pass by, but he doesn't have the energy to scream. Luckily he still has the flare in his pocket and manages to light it up just in time. Mitsu sees him and immediately makes the train stop so the kids can run to reunite with their father. Later on the train, Mitsu gives Yoshiyuki his toupee, but he throws it away. When the train goes through a tunnel, the engine smoke enters the cars through the windows and leaves everyone coughing. It also makes their faces black, causing them to laugh. On day 108, the family finally makes it to the village and meets with Sasaki, who can't believe he's finally being visited. 2 years and 126 days later, the Suzukis are happy in their new farm life. They fish, sow, and enjoy the vegetables they planted themselves. One morning, Yoshiyuki is awakened by a strange sound. He leaves the house to follow it and discovers an alarm clock ringing in a storage house. Suddenly the village's speakers start playing music and all the neighbors come out to look at the streetlights again. A few days later, all the original Tokyo residents are back in the city. On TV, experts have many theories about the cause of the blackout: a solar flare, a comet that came too close to Earth, and even cyber terrorism. The Suzukis now spend more time with each other and aren't afraid of chores. They install an old-style landline telephone at home and Yoshiyuki keeps using a bicycle to go to work. When the mailman brings them a letter, they're delighted to find the picture the Saito boy took of them on the road.
Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain an episode from an American adult animated anthology, Love, Death, and Robots, called The Drowned Giant. Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. At the beginning of the episode, 3 scientists drive to a beach, while one of them, named Steven, narrates about a naked, dead giant. The day before, a massive storm had hit the sea, which washed up a dead body of a giant to the shore. The surprised local fishermen contacted the officials, who at first refused to believe such atrocious news. But as people began to visit the beach and return home with crazy stories, the scientists decided to go see for themselves. And so, Steven and his colleagues, who thought that everyone was just bluffing about the dead giant, now stand before him. A crowd surrounds the corpse, scared to touch it before being absolutely sure that it's safe. Steven's colleagues guess that the man weighs somewhere around 80 tons. Steven narrates that the vast proportion of his features makes it difficult for them to figure out his age, but looking at the giant's defined nose and mouth, he believes that he had been a young man with a modest temper. The 3 go around the giant's body, inspecting him. Steven sees a pool of water that had been collected in the corpse's palm, where tiny fishes swim. Steven says that beyond the size of the giant, the simple fact that he exists surprises him the most. He compares the giant's existence to the crowd on the beach and concludes that they are just imperfect and puny copies of him. As Steven looks at the creature, mesmerized, his colleague climbs on top of the corpse's chest and waves towards the crowd, indicating that it is safe to come near it. The people run towards him while cheering and climb up on top. Some of them comment that the body is rubbery and bouncy. Children start playing on his chest, trashing it with their shoes. Stephen, however, doesn't touch or climb on it. He and his colleagues stare at the giant from afar while writing their notes. As time passes by, the people get enough of playing with the dead giant, and everyone returns home. After 3 days, Stephen visits the beach again. Because of his growing interest in the giant, his facility assigns him the role of keeping tabs on it. Stephen claims that he wasn't morbid about keeping an eye on a dead person because, for him, the giant was more alive than the people around him. He watches as kids play slide on the corpse's chest, and some workers plan to butcher his femur bone. The following day, Stephen deliberately postponed his visit to the beach until late afternoon so that no one would be around. When he gets there, the corpse looks in bad form and has started to decay. A teenage girl sits comfortably on the giant's ear, using it as a chair. Stephen notices that the giant's face has a much less youthful look than it had before. He assumes it is because of prolonged immersion in seawater and tumefaction of tissue. As a crab crawls out of the giant's mouth, the scientist claims that it won't be long until he decays fully. Stephen finally gets the courage to set foot on the corpse. Atop his chest, he sees a sandcastle someone had built. Then, his other arm comes into view, showing us that half of it has already decayed, and whatever remained of it has been taken away by the people. Meanwhile, his cornea has become hazy and cloudy, which gives his eyes a whirlpool effect. Stephen looks at them, saying that the giant's suffering is less tragic than this isolation that he is facing. The next time he visits the giant, both of his arms and one of his legs have decayed and been cut. Stephen walks around, looking at the corpse, which has been vandalized by teens who spray paint insults on his body. He is reluctant to witness the end of the magnificent creature, but the insults make him feel that the creature is more human, because it seems more vulnerable to him now. When Stephen comes to the beach the following day, he is almost relieved to see that the corpse's head has been removed. Birds eat its flesh as Stephen watches it from afar. Without the head, the corpse looked less human, which reduces Stephen's relationship with the corpse that he had formed. After that day, he doesn't visit the beach for a few weeks. On his next journey, he witnesses that any feature indicating that the corpse was once human has vanished. The only thing that remains is the decaying gut of the once magnificent creature. By now, the interest of the crowd in the giant has expired. Months later, after the giant's arrival has been forgotten, various pieces of his body can be seen around town, especially his bones, which are used as decorations. While cycling one day, Stephen notices the giant's skull lying abandoned. He believes that if he looks around the town's pubs, he will find mummified noses and ears as well. According to Stephen, these decorations convey the giant's greatness, better than Stephen's memory of his bloated and decaying appendages. As for the giant's genitals, it is shown that it had been cut off and placed in the Freak Museum in a circus. Stephen narrates that the apparatus occupies a whole tent to itself, but is sadly mislabeled as belonging to a whale. At last, the scientist says that the people who saw the giant remember him only as a sea monster. However, for him, the giant is still alive, and he often dreams of his resurrection. In his dreams, the giant strides through the town, picking up his fragments on his return journey to the sea. The episode, although short, has a deep and metaphorical meaning in every scene. The fans of the episode have interpreted it their own way, but many believe that the narrator Stephen is the giant himself. Stephen feels the pain of the dead giant when no one else can. So, some fans think that Stephen and the giant are the same person. The giant might be trying to communicate through Stephen. Moreover, the way Stephen describes several stages of the decaying of the corpse in such detail makes one wonder if he is the one going through the stages. The decaying of the giant's corpse is also seen as a metaphor for several things. The narrator, Stephen, observes the decaying of the corpse very closely at every stage. First, he sees the process that was supposed to happen, that is, his body decaying by the passage of time. Then he notices people starting to amputate the corpse, treating it as a commodity. And the way humans treat him poorly showed him the extent of consumerism and exploitation that is considered normal in today's world. As the story progresses, Stephen begins to question what it means to be human, and when do we decide that we have lost humanity? Until the corpse had no head, he thought of it as a human just like him and the others around him. In fact, he believed that the giant was more of a human than tiny creatures like himself. However, after Stephen's sympathy towards the giant dropped, when he saw him only as a mass of flesh. Throughout the episode, we do not know who the giant is or where he came from. Rather, the drowned giant focuses more on the contrast of Stephen and other people's feelings towards the giant. In the book itself, J.G. Ballard concludes with the detail about the giant's appendage being displayed in a circus. This is to emphasize how much the giant was humiliated, even though he possessed a greater existence than them all. It also denotes humans' superficial and exploitative nature. Moreover, his genitals were labeled to be of a whale's, and his bones were mere decorations for the people. Here, it is clear that the giant has been completely stripped of his humanity. However, Stephen describes the genitals and decorated bones as the only things that convey how magnificent of a being the giant was. Although he loves and remembers the creature more than anyone else, he believes that his memory of his decaying body would have never conveyed his greatness the way his preserved body parts do. The giant was just a myth before being washed up to the shore. People experienced his arrival for a short while, but forgot about him soon, turning his existence into a myth once again. We humans, like the giant, will someday fade away and remain only in the memories of the people we met. But eventually, those memories will fade as well, and we simply cease to exist. The premise of the movie is set far in the future. Humankind, as a race, is evolving at its own pace when one discovery changes everything. A massive fireball similar to the sun is approaching the Earth at high speed. Time passes, and soon enough, the Earth faces the effects of having two suns. Heat, radiation, and unnatural gravitational pull kill billions and put human life at risk. The second sun will take about 200 years to gradually fly away from the solar system, and by then, humankind will be long extinct. To avoid the worst-case scenario, a group of survivors build a self-sustaining underground city called Ember. Its resources and food supply are predicted to last for 200 years, after which humans will be allowed to return to the surface. However, they can only do so using a very specific path that can be accessed only by using a map. The path is kept a secret to avoid curious people exploring it before the time comes. Meanwhile, the map and the instructions are kept in a locker, timed at 200 years. The very first mayor of Ember gets to keep the box, and as time goes by, it is handed down from mayor to mayor. Everything goes according to plan until one day, the current mayor dies and the safe is forgotten about. Just like that, 200 years pass, and the box opens on its own, but no one pays attention to its contents, and it remains unused inside a closet. The Ember City is powered by a singular generator that is on the verge of breaking down. Moreover, the canned food supply, which is kept in the treasury, is also running out at a frightening rate. Then, we are introduced to the city's social and work environment. After graduating high school, every youngster is assigned to a job based on a random draw. Some get to be the mailman, others get to work the food, while the luckiest ones get to become YouTube narrators. Just kidding, they're kept in charge of the generator. Likewise, the next graduating class has an ambitious young man named Dune. He has always been interested in machines, following in his father's footsteps, who is a famous mechanic. Dune eagerly wants to be designated to repair the generator, but his dreams are crushed when he is made the mailman of the city. What a nerd. He is best friends with a girl named Lena, who is assigned to be the city pipe handler. Okay. Since it was her childhood dream to become a mailman, Dune secretly allows her to change professions with him. This way, he gets to be close to the generator, because the city pipelines are laid around the same area. At night, Lena excitedly tells her grandmother about her profession. The old woman knows something about the secret passageway, but she has dementia and has forgotten most of it. Lena's late father also had an idea about the exit path, which is proven true through his final voice message that they listened to in his memory. He has described the outside world very vaguely in the voice message, hence the girls think of it as gibberish. Someone named Barrow is also mentioned at one point, but no one of such name resides in the city, therefore the girls never thought anything of it. The following day is Lena's first day at work. She happily distributes letters until a loud commotion is heard. A homeless man is being apprehended for spreading false rumors because he claims to have seen giant insects in the dark side of the city where no one is allowed to go. No one believes him, but Lena finds a body part that the man dropped, which looks too much like a giant beetle horn. Elsewhere, Dune also reports on the first day of his job and instantly notices the rusty pipes and broken spare parts. His boss is a grumpy old man named Sul, who has been in this line of work his entire life. He knows everything about the city's pipelines and is well aware that it is at risk of being flooded. Sul wants Dune to refrain from using his brain because the city workers have tried everything and given up on finding a permanent fix to the problems. Dune is handed the helmet of a dead worker before he is put to work. He keeps the mentor's words in mind, but is adamant about looking for a solution, refusing to let his people die in a flood. Later that day, he steals the pipeline map from Saul and starts exploring the tunnels. He eventually comes across a room named 351. It piques his interest because the room is not on the map and is locked. Dune decides to ignore it for now and continues the exploration to reach another dark and mysterious tunnel. No one knows what it leads to, and it is too scary to explore. Walking further, Dune ends up inside the city's food storage unit, which is almost empty. While looking around, he is caught by the food guard, Looper. No one in the city likes him because he was previously accused of stealing cans of food, but wasn't convicted. If I were Looper, I'd be sneaking bites too. Then, suddenly, the generator stops working, leaving the city in complete darkness. The engineers do their best to fix it temporarily, but everyone knows it won't work for a long time. After work that night, Lena goes home to her frantic grandmother, telling her about a box in the closet. It turns out that her great-grandfather was the mayor, who died without passing the safe down. She finally checks the closet to find the years-old safe, but doesn't know what to do with it. The next day at work, Lena meets Looper, the infamous guard of the food storage unit. He gives her a letter to hand over to the current mayor. At the mayor's mansion, Lena sees a drawer full of cans and notices the mayor trying to hide it. Her eyes also land on a picture of her great-grandfather, where he is holding the box she found in the closet. Meanwhile, people are starting to suffer from the first stage of food and medicine shortage. They are preparing themselves for the inevitable big blackout. Lena shows Dune the beetle horn she found yesterday, and Dune confirms with the textbooks to ensure it is authentic. Dune's father is an expert in such things, but has no answer to how a beetle can be so big. Moreover, he wants his son to stop being curious about the things outside the city. After the failed meeting with his father, Lena shows Dune the contents of the safe. It has a shiny glass plate, a torn piece of paper, and a bunch of strange markings. They put together the torn page and discover it has the instructions for the way out of the city. It tells them to use the locked door 351 to find the said passage. The duo sneaks into the tunnels to investigate further, but is caught by a limping man. He runs away as soon as he sees them and drops many food cans on the way. Dune is shocked because the cans are of a food that the city ran out of a long time ago. Before they investigate further, a gigantic star-nosed mole attacks them, and they have to escape through the tunnels. When things calm down a little, Lena notices her father's name written on Dune's helmet, meaning he was the worker who died wearing it. Dune reveals that he drowned while working in the pipelines. Later, Lena returns home and asks her Aunt Lane about her father's death. Lane discloses that her father was obsessed with finding a way out of the city and had discovered the shortest path. However, he drowned while on the final part of the mission. Lena is shocked by how tragic her father's death was. She is distracted by her thoughts when she notices Looper limping down the street. It reminds her of the person in the tunnels, and she quickly goes to tell Dune. The two then finally open the door to room 351 and find it filled with food supplies that the mayor has collected for himself. It is more than enough to last him a lifetime, while his people die of starvation. Sounds familiar? The duo does not wake up the sleeping mayor and returns to Lisa's house. They listen to her father's recording again, and this time, Dune recognizes the person Barrow mentioned in the message as his father. He runs to the old man and inquires about the tunnels and Lena's father. It is revealed that Barrow and Lena's father were partners on a mission to find an exit. They were never successful, and Barrow's close friends lost their lives because of their obsessions with looking for an exit. Therefore, he didn't want to tell Dune about the mission, not wanting his son to go down the same path. Best if his son just dies instead. Dune understands his father's concerns, but is adamant about completing the task that they started. Moreover, he has the help of the map and the box, unlike they did in the past. Elsewhere, Lena tries to expose the mayor, but is caught. The lights go off at the right time, giving her a chance to steal the mayor's batch and run away. She and Dune are on the list of wanted criminals and have nowhere to go. In such a situation, they use a special vehicle to run to the generator room. Then, they join the stolen mayor batch and the glass they found in the box to create a key with the symbol of the generator on it. They think it is the key to the room, but are wrong. Lena inspects the instructions and discovers that they have to look behind the locker for something. Upon checking, they reveal a secret chamber behind one of the lockers that consists of several more empty lockers. The use for these is unknown, but the next instruction asks them to move a wheel clockwise. As soon as they do so, the lockers line up and slide into the generator room. Even a baby could have solved that riddle. The door to the room finally opens, and they come face to face with a subterranean river connected to a massive piece of machinery. The locker is not actually used to hold things, but was made as a boat to transfer humans to the surface. However, to make it work, they still have to raise the water level above a massive wheel, stopping the river's path. They go through the next instruction, which asks them to enter the emergency control room. The badge finally comes to use as the key, and they go into the chamber that has levers and buttons to control the entire machine. They activate the wheel as the instruction asks them, which causes the water level to rise slowly. However, the plan backfires when the sudden surge of pressure causes the lights in the city to glow brighter and eventually break. The people are even more scared when the pipelines break, putting the city at risk of being flooded. The mayor thinks this is the end and goes to his waterproof chamber to save his life. But karma catches up to him when he is attacked by a giant mole and killed before everyone else. Suddenly, the wheel stops working, and the pipeline worker Saul comes to save the day. He fixes the wheel, but has to keep on holding a lever for it to continue working. It is an extremely dangerous task, but he recognizes that it is the only way people's lives can be saved. The water level rises immediately after the wheel is fixed, and Dune has to reluctantly leave Saul to look for an exit. After that, Dune, Lena, and her little sister sit on the locker boat, and a massive wave pushes them above and away from the wheel. The three go down a series of dark and scary tunnels, hoping to be alive when everything is over. They almost give up when they slide down a steep slope, but when they open their eyes again, they find themselves in a pond. A few meters away is a bright door, which finally leads them to the surface of the earth. The duo is not as happy as they should be, because it is nighttime, and they assume the outside is just as dark as the inside. But then, they witness their first sunrise, and their eyes go blind. Sparkle with joy. The land is inhabitable again, and they can finally live a fulfilled life. Suddenly, the group notices a bird and follows it to reach a very deep hole. They can see a hint of Ember City from this height, but their voice doesn't reach down below. As a last resort, they tie the map and their messages to a rock and throw it inside. Fortunately, Dune's father receives the message, and the entirety of the city is saved.